Welcome to the Late Night Club podcast. This is your host, Garrett Mallon, with Dr. Giraldo, who has a PhD in philosophy, Mr. Selman, Esquire, and Dr. Nash, a mechanical engineer who is leading Tesla's autonomous vehicle design team. Today we'll be discussing autonomous vehicles, and more importantly, the ethics of the decision-making process for autonomous vehicles. This is a topic that is generally overlooked by people when they think about autonomous vehicles, but there are some technicalities that complicate the decision-making process for autonomous vehicles. Here we have Dr. Nash to talk about some of these problems.
Well, the Society of Automotive Engineers classify autonomous vehicles in 6 different levels, with level 0 being where it's fully manual, so your regular cars that you see today, to level 5 where it's completely autonomous, so there's no human interaction involved. Difficulty is many companies like Uber and Google are currently at a level 2, where there's a limited form of autonomy, so you have automated steering and acceleration capabilities. But the thing that we're trying to get is where we don't have to just rely on lane changes and things like that. The ideal future would be where you can sit back and sip some of your coffee, potentially even sleep. But one of the major difficulties that my design team and I are facing currently is coding it to a point where the autonomous vehicle isn't necessarily susceptible to being hacked, to the point where it can be dangerous to others on the road, because our overall goal at the end of the day is to keep safety our main priority. But this becomes difficult when we encounter moral and ethical problems such as the trolley situation.
Yes, Dr. Nash, that's something I've looked into in my research. And basically the trolley situation is a no-win situation in which no matter what happens, someone is going to end up on the losing side. So in these situations, you have to decide whether to alter the course of the vehicle or to allow it to simply run how it was going to. So situations like this include, should I veer and hit another oncoming car, or should I continue to go straight and hit the pedestrian that is currently crossing the street? So we need to find a way to program this into the car's software in order to decide the outcomes of these situations. But then a new challenge comes up in that who figures out these moral standards, and we need to create like a global moral code. So right now, 90% of all the vehicles are controlled by 4 major companies, which are Waymo, Uber, GM, and Apple. So we need to find a way for all 4 of these companies to come together and create one code that will be used for all autonomous vehicles in the present and in the future. So this is something that could either be decided by the companies themselves, or the government might have to get involved in order to make one global standard.
Yeah, Dr. Giraldo, that makes me wonder who would be held responsible when this situation does occur. Mr. Selman, do you have anything to say about that?
So the biggest problem we have right now is there's really a lack of legal precedent, which means that there haven't been that many cases. So we don't really know how the courts are going to go about deciding these cases. So of the 88 accidents that have happened, 81 of them, the courts have found the driver liable, which is understandable because the cars right now are only at SAE levels 2 or 3. But this is definitely going to change because by 2020, 6 firms are going to release level 4 cars. So we're entering a new frontier of court cases, and how the courts just decide to choose these upcoming cases is really important because it's going to influence how future firms choose to design their cars. So the courts have 2 options. First one is products liability, which they test to see if there's a design defect. But the problem with this is it's expensive and it's slow. The other option is strict liability, which is the owners get blamed no matter what. So you kind of equate it to owning a dog. So let's say your dog runs off the leash and it goes and bites your neighbor. You are going to be held liable, not your dog. And it would be the same thing with autonomous cars. And you can probably see how this is unfair as well. Once we get to level 5 cars, since those are going to be almost entirely autonomous, you don't really have much control. Whereas with a dog, you can be responsible owner, hold on to its leash, whatnot. So eventually the goal is we don't have any accidents because the technology moves to that point where there are going to be so few accidents. And this topic is going to be pretty irrelevant, but right now it's very important because it's going to decide the path that we take to get to that future where there are no accidents.
Wow. I think that you all brought up some really interesting points, and I hope that a lot of these questions get answered in the near future. Thank you guys for sharing your input, and thanks to all our listeners for listening today.